Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the East Podcast. My name is Partha Srinivasan, and at the podcast, we talk about everything that is engineering, applied sciences, and technology, and how these pieces of information apply to you, how they impact you, the end consumer. We talk about technologies that come closer to your senses, and whether it's enterprise technology or just simple consumer technologies like driverless cars, we bring in subject matter experts from around the world to come in, and I pick their brains so that I can learn a little more, simplify the concept a little more for you to understand, and hopefully at the end of the podcast, we learn something new about. Today we are joined by Vignesh Raja, and we're going to be talking about blockchain. But before we jump into the topic itself, Vignesh, could you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, everybody. Partha, pleasure joining you here. So my name is Vignesh, and I'm a advisor and a senior consultant for blockchain technologies at Wipro Limited. So I've been in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space for the past 4 years and been actively involved in this space. And again, thanks for the invite and pleasure being in this podcast.
So Vignesh, tell me a little bit about your tryst with blockchain. I mean, you've been on the cryptocurrency side, and now you're on the actual blockchain side. So first, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into a little bit about what the differences between the two concepts are.
Sure. So my stint with the cryptocurrency and blockchain started way back in 2013, where I was requested to set up an digital currency exchange in the United Arab Emirates, and that's where we set up an exchange here. And way back in 2013, where blockchain was not evolved concept, there was only Bitcoin. So we were trying to set up the exchange here and trying to promote the concept of Bitcoin to the customers and and also the government regulators and all the other people, right? So we started off with having a conference in 2015 at the Dubai International Financial Center. That's when we had people all around the globe coming over to for the conference, and I was very fortunate enough to listen to some of the key thought leaders from the Bitcoin space coming over and discuss about the future of the technology. And that's how I got involved. I got so interested in this particular technology, and I thought, okay, this is what I want to be in next 5 to 10 years. That's why I got into Bitcoin and also was involved in the blockchain technology. Now, moving forward, so we have been invited by the Prime Minister's office in 2016, Prime Minister's office of Dubai, to basically set up the Dubai Blockchain Council, and that's how the journey started for me as well. And also, I've been glad that I was also involved in seeing basically the growth of the technology in Middle East right from the beginning.
So now you're actually involved at a government level in the UAE talking about blockchain. Before we can actually jump into what you've been doing in terms of activity per se within the blockchain space, could we probably explain what the difference between the currency is and what the actual blockchain is, and probably start at the beginning of how the two came about?
Sure. So the first concept that came about was basically in 2008 during the financial crisis. There was a white paper that was floated by a gentleman called Santoshi Nakamoto. Then, so the white paper basically discussed about the peer-to-peer cash system. Yeah. So this particular uh, technology that enabled the peer-to-peer cash system is what Bitcoin became into Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is basically the cryptocurrency wherein you can send Bitcoins from one person to another. So when you do a transaction, so basically it gets broadcasted to a group of miners, a group of computers, which actually validates the transaction. So when you compare to the current system, say for example, centralized system, wherein you have a bank or you have a centralized nodal body which actually validates a transaction. So in case of a Bitcoin-based transaction, the validation happens in a decentralized way, where we have a group of computers validating. Yeah. So this is more towards the cryptocurrency of Bitcoin.
Okay.
The technology that enables this particular transaction or validation is behind Bitcoin is called blockchain. Yeah. So what happened is way back in 2000, I think around 2014 and 15, is when corporates and startups and the government regulate entities have started looking seriously behind their technology. They saw a lot of potential behind the applications, a lot of other applications on the technology behind Bitcoin. Yeah. So that's when we had Ethereum, which they call it as the version 2.0 of Bitcoin, which is basically Ethereum came out with a smart contract feature. That was a feature that was given just more like a automated if-then statements. Basically, it triggers a lot of automation based on some events. Yeah, so that's how Ethereum came into picture. And post that, what happened is companies like IBM, SAP, and all the big IT technology powerhouses, they came together along with Linux Foundation, which established a private. They found there is a lot of use case wherein they can just harness the power of blockchain without the need of using the cryptocurrency. The reason is being, especially in the regulators aspect, cryptocurrency is not seen as a very positive way, or it was not because there's a lot of anonymity involved, and there's no way to track the two parties. So there was a bit of a just to make sure that the regulators are comfortable and it can be more suited to the corporate and the day-to-day life of a B2B and a ecosystem. So the private blockchain was established, and that's how Hyperledger came into existence. So it starts with the Linux Foundation, wherein they had set up this Hyperledger consortium, wherein they brought in together the biggest IT companies, writing from the system integrators, starting from Wipro, Infosys, and all the top Accentures of the world. Then you had the tech companies like SAP and IBM contributing to the code of Hyperledger. So that's how the blockchain technology per se came into picture. So you have two versions: the public version, which is more towards the cryptocurrency space. You have the Ethereum, Bitcoin, and all that. Then you have the private version, which we have. You have this Hyperledger. You have the private version of Ethereum. It's called Quorum, initiated by JP Morgan, and much more. So recently, we also have a platform called Coda, which was paved off from a consortium of banks, which has got a lot of traction among the financial space. So basically, this is the difference. So one is the private, and another is the public side of the cryptocurrency space. Hope that is clear.
Yeah, that does clear a lot of misunderstandings or maybe some of the cloudiness around the difference between blockchain and Bitcoin or any of the cryptocurrencies. Is a cryptocurrency still a valid point? I mean, is this something that still exists? I mean, do people use it, and how stable or unstable, or where is it going? And like we saw it. I mean, there was also a lot. There's a lot of murkiness behind the history of the cryptocurrency as well. Like they were used only in the black market or on the dark web, and now you have it actually coming out and being used. You can actually trade, and there are a couple of restaurants that actually work with cryptocurrency. But how have you seen it evolve? Is it going to get somewhere with the cryptocurrency?
Sure. So initially, cryptocurrency was basically envisioned to replace cash, right? Day-to-day activities. But I don't think that will happen in the nearby future. The reason being, it is too volatile for end consumer to basically use as a day-to-day currency to purchase a normal good, because every now and then the price fluctuates in a huge way. So that is why it will never be. I don't think in the next 5 to 10 years we don't see it as a normal currency. What it might be is basically it be a store of value. So Bitcoin has become a store of value, wherein it'll be like a people call it as like a digital gold, though it doesn't have a intrinsic like a value like gold, but it does have the people people in countries like Venezuela, countries like Zimbabwe, wherein the value of the national currency is deteriorating. They feel where we cannot even believe in the national banks. So Bitcoin is an alternative investments because it's like you control the entire. When you have a Bitcoin wallet, your digital currency wallet, you basically control it, and you don't have to depend on a banks or a centralized custodian. So that's where I think Bitcoin will ever get into. So the cryptocurrency will get into where it will become a store of value. Having said that, in the future, what's happening is there are companies which are coming out with stable coin concept to actually take care of the fluctuation. So this is basically enables cryptocurrency to be used as a day-to-day currency. So you must have heard about the stable coin concept. They started with a Tether, which was basically backed by US dollars. So it's just a cryptocurrency backed by real dollars, and you have a reserve of dollars sitting out in a bank or on a vault somewhere. So that are the initiatives that's been taken in this by the startups globally, wherein they're coming out of the ways, wherein they're trying to see whether they can stabilize the price of the cryptocurrency and it can be widely used. But we are still in the early stages. But in the future, what I believe is now central banks around the globe are also experimenting with their own digital currencies. So you have Bank of Thailand, wherein Wipro as a company was also involved in basically doing a pilot along with Tricoda for with a group of 8 banks along with the Central Bank of Thailand, where we did a pilot around the payment system. So there are we see that going forward there will be central banks that will be issuing their national currencies, digital currencies pegged by the national currency, and there will be an interlay between the national digital currency and the cryptocurrencies. So I feel we are still going for a next 5-10 years. There are interesting things going to come. Then there will be wide adoption of cryptocurrencies going forward. And even if you say, even if you see, Facebook has come out with the Libra concept of cryptocurrencies, still in the early stages. So I would feel we've started off with with the initial trial phase with a lot of hype, and now people have understood the concept. Now looking at now they are looking at a way economic model of using this particular technology, and also the beautiful concept of cryptocurrencies in a more practical fashion.
That's awesome. So now my question is, so are we moving to a future where we would see the financial systems, or even anything that is anything to do with money, or anything to do with a transaction, moving more to the blockchain concept? So where we are using the central ledger, the centralized verified ledger system, rather than using the cryptocurrency as a reward system, which I believe is how it initially came about. The Bitcoin was basically a reward for verifying the ledger, saying, "Okay, thank you very much for your effort. Here's a little bit of something of value for you for your effort put in." So, are we moving in to that kind of an era where the blockchain powers the system, but we're still going to be using the old brick and mortar raw currency system to kind of keep moving? Or is it going to be like you mentioned, there's going to be like a hybrid system? So if you could probably explore a little bit, explain a little bit about that as well.
Sure. So see, initially, Bitcoin, as you exactly said, it was more the cryptocurrency was used more. We have a reward based of a reward based system. So the way the consensus works in a Bitcoin, it's called proof of work. Basically, rewarding the people for verification, rewarding the people in Bitcoins for verifying a transaction. But the problem there is this slow. It takes a lot of time. It's very slow do a validation. That is the main reason why you have this private blockchains coming over. But then now companies like Hedera Hashgraph, which is claiming itself to be the third or the fourth generation of distributed ledger technologies, and where it is not even a blockchain, doesn't even cut a block, and they use a very complicated series of acyclic graphs, and they use something called gossip around gossip. So different protocols and different way of basically validating a transactions. But they claim to have around 10,000 throughput of 10,000 transactions per second for cryptocurrency. So there are new technologies coming over. Finding out new ways of incentivizing the people. Here we don't have miners, you have corporates. In Hedera Hashgraph, I know that here the companies they are trying to become the first enterprise public distributed ledger technology, where you have 32 companies, 39 companies coming together to validate a transaction. So it's more like a supercomputer that is spread across globally. and all you have to do is create an application. You don't worry, you have to have the infrastructure. This is what's going to be the future, wherein you have all your infrastructure that is either on premise or it is on cloud, where you have to create, you have to serve. We have companies and government entities right now. Have a huge data warehouses sitting in there on premise and stuff. What I see in the future is basically people will start believing the internet and the privacy. The issue right now is the data privacy, which I think will be sorted going forward. Once that kind of a maturity is coming in the market, people will definitely get into the cloud, and after that, I will see a new wave of decentralized internet coming in, wherein people don't have to worry about the infrastructure. All they have to do is create applications and deploy it on the cloud, and do it, and the verification will be a completely decentralized way, a very very safe way instead of a single point of failure. Hope that makes sense.
No, that does. So now my question is, I see a lot of markets have already moved to a so-called digital currency. I mean, you have a lot of mobile wallets, you have digital wallets, you have, like, if you come to India, you have a lot of these Paytms and the MobiQuicks and a lot of these mobile wallet systems that are moving around, and these are not powered by. I mean, you have the banks at the back end. I mean, the entire unified payment, the UPI system, is powered by the MPCI. But on the front end, you have NBFCs who are actually ruling the roost on these mobile digital payments. Are we seeing these systems move to a more blockchain or more centrally verified system? Or because these are still very working in piecemeal, they're still working in their own individual little systems. So, are we seeing something more unified in the future, and how is this going to impact the customers?
Yes, so see here what happens is now it's still it's centralized, correct? So you still have a single entity. UPI is a great concept, and also you have the Aadhaar, which is also a great technology, great concept, yeah. But the thing is, still it's a single point of failure. You still have one entity that controls everything. What I'm saying is, in the future, there will be more decentralized, and where people will have control over their what they own. So I have companies now creating in cities where they're creating something called self-sovereign identity, wherein people take control of their identities. They create the identities and they choose to share who they want to share and what they want to share. This is what's going to happen in the future, where centralized entities, will be the middleman, or the centralized entity will be eventually moved out, and you'll have a decentralized way of verification, and people will have more control over what they own, the data own. It will start with identity. It will move over to even the payment space, wherein they will have the control over the. Yes, or you'll have banks, you will have regulators, everybody will be part of the chain, but the ecosystem will completely evolve, and each one will have a different. They'll play a different role as the ecosystem evolves. So Paytm is there. Yes, you have MobiQuick. All these guys are still centralized. So we will go for a decentralized way, wherein people have control over about the money, they will have control over the identity. That's what I think we are moving into. And this is the starting point. Once the technology evolves, the blockchain is still a nascent technology and still in the earlier stages. It has its own challenges of scaling up, and scaling up and regarding the security aspects, and it has issues like interoperability between different blockchains. So these are things that has to be addressed. Once all these issues are addressed, I am very hopeful that I'm very positive that things will go into a decentralized space, wherein people will have far more control over over their personal identities, and also on their financial aspects.
But what steps are being taken in the privacy and security fields for these things to actually become a reality? Because obviously, with a lot of decentralization, there is also the fear that there'll be a lot of fake data that's floating around, and that could also very well be verified if it's like a mafia sort of situation. So, what are the steps that are being taken to verify the authenticity of the source, as well as to make sure that the privacy and security of people who are actually a part of the system, who are real, are not being hurt? So what is being done there?
Yeah, so see, if we say in that example, end of the day, the person who puts in the transaction is still the technology has its own limitations. So end of the day, the data that's put in the blockchain or in the public ledger is still a individual, right? So if he is rogue, we cannot be doing anything. But having said that, when it comes to the encryption part and also when it comes to the data privacy part, you see companies, especially the corporate companies like us, focusing towards following guidelines like the international guidelines of GDPR, which has been established in Europe. And also, I believe in India, we have a new data protection rules are coming in. So, whenever we do a private blockchain setup for our clients, we make sure that we follow these norms. And in fact, we are doing some of these use cases on implementation where we take into consideration all this data privacy rules, and we also explain to the regulators and the clients that we will like to, we will explain to them on the importance of using this data privacy, because the issue with blockchain is, once the data is in, it's a very hard, especially in the public blockchain. Once you put in the data, it's not possible to basically erase it. So we make sure that the data that goes into the blockchain is encrypted, and even if you put in the data, it is not a personal information. It's only like a hash of information. That is, hash is basically uh, the hash of information which gets into the blockchain, and we don't actually put in the personal data. So this basically do when we architect a particular solution on a blockchain, we make sure that we are there to the global data privacy standards.
My question is then, what are the steps that a customer or a consumer would need to take to be aware that they are so how does a person build awareness around the fact that they are either in a blockchain system, and what can they do to improve or make it better?
See, as a person, because honestly, if you see the most of this applications that's going on right now is on it's more towards the B2B space, right? So either the government entities are taking control over this particular blockchain platform. So in this case, what happens is the person may not be aware, right? See, he is someone who is in the front end. He may not be aware about the system. So he has to what he has to take care is he has to make sure when he shares his identity to the government entity or a particular company, he has to be making sure that he shares only the valid data, and he doesn't share to have all this personal information that's not required. So, in fact, what is happening is whatever systems that we are designing globally, so each time when validation happens, identity validation happens, it has to go through a consumer consent. So, in case if the government of India or in the future, any new government of a particular country is coming out with a digital identity based solution, the consumer has to make sure that they get the consent to basically consent to basically share the data with any of the individuals or the regulator or the banks, whoever it may be. So they have to be aware of what to share. Now, having said that, there are solutions that is coming more directly towards the B2C space, where I told you that the self-sovereign identity, where consumer can himself create an identity of himself, prove that he is the person he is, and he shares the data with other entities for verification. So that's when he can take care of where he controls. He has to make sure that he only shares the data. That is very that is very secure. Make sure that the entire platform is secure before even transacts the data with anybody.
Okay, so now coming back to some of the initiatives that are being taken on in the entire blockchain space, where do we see blockchain being most useful that directly impacts customer or consumer behavior?
Yeah. So right now, what we see is there's been a lot of traction more towards the government side, public sector. The reason being because blockchain will work more towards the consortium-based model, where you will have a group of entities coming together to create a trusted network. So in that space, the public sectors around the globe have been very active. And this is where we see a lot of traction. So I would say cities like in Dubai, where they have already started working on digital identity projects, basically collecting KYC information of doing a decentralized way of KYC sharing between different banks. So for the end consumer, the biggest advantage is you don't have to do your KYC documentation each and every time to visit each of the other banks. So you do it once, then all you have to do is you authorize your banks to share the KYC with other banks. So it becomes a seamless process. So this is a real world use case that we see that's actually going to be big. Other than that, you have companies like Ripple, which is actually doing cross-border payments, and they have been successful in bringing down the cost of cross-border payments between. So it can be Dubai to India or from the Dubai to Philippines. So there are banks which have already adopted this particular technology, and going forward, we see a lot of interlay between blockchain and IoT. The reason I'm saying that basically the IoT sensors and IoT devices right now are more or less, they're not very secure. So blockchain with its security aspects can create a very nice correlation with the IoT devices. So we could see that a lot of companies globally are using a blockchain based, they're connecting the IoT sensors, IoT devices along with the blockchain, and paving way for machine to machine communication. And that I believe will be the future, where people have started using blockchain for supply chain, basically connecting with IoT devices. In the future, I could see there are a lot of companies using blockchain as a communication layer, de facto communication layer between the machines. So tomorrow you will have autonomous vehicles talking to each other through an IoT sensors, yes, but the communication medium will be a blockchain based medium. That's why it's getting into.
That sounds very interesting, but then how long into the future? I mean, obviously this is still very development stage work. So are we going to be seeing any of this actually become technology that directly impacts the consumers anytime soon, or is this still maybe another 10-15 years in the making?
I don't think it'll take 15 years. So see, the technology, as I said, it's not a front-end technology. It's not like a AR or a VR where you have something visual, right? So you'll have it as a backend. What happens is companies like SAP, Oracle, and even IBM, they are putting blockchain as a layer. It's part of their existing infrastructure product, right? So I would feel as blockchain will become in next 5 years will become one of the de facto standards. So it's like your TCP IP or something like a standard protocol standard that will be already existing in the backend. The consumer, real world consumer, will not know the real whether blockchain is implemented or not. But in the backend, I do feel that each of the every system going forward 5 years, at least 30 to 40% of the current enterprise systems will be getting into blockchain based system. Yeah. So so this is what's going to happen. But I feel the companies already started implementing it. There are standards that is going to come up. As I said, it's a new technology. There's no existing standards as of now, but there are standards coming up for each of the every industry. So now I said about autonomous vehicles. So there's a company called Mobi. So Mobi is a consortium of auto companies, big companies like BMW. You have Ford. You have a lot of big automakers, OEMs, technology companies. Everybody coming together to define standards for basically using blockchain for the for the auto industry. And they have been throwing challenges, and they have been able to even successfully conduct events in even in India. And no, they're coming out with some workshop groups and stuff. I would say next 5 years we should be able to have standards defined. Once the standards are defined, then I think this will become like a de facto, and people will not know, honestly, they not know it's a blockchain or not. But I believe this will happen especially this will be in the backend system of every computer in the future.
If somebody is looking to get into working in the blockchain system, what would they need to do? I mean, in terms of an education, or in terms of reading, or in terms of learning, what are the different tools that are available right now for a person to be relevant in the future? Let's suppose they want to go work on the blockchain space. What do they need to do and learn?
So you're talking about the business aspects or from the more from the developing aspects?
So it's from both sides. I mean, if you want to look at it from the business aspect, obviously there are a lot of people or a lot of professionals who are in the space, in the IT or the ITES space right now, and they're probably looking to move into the blockchain space to figure out if they're relevant for them or not. Or if there are new students, or if there are engineering students or developers who are coming out of university and they're trying to see if blockchain or crypto is something that they would like to work in. So what are the steps that they need to take? So we'll first approach from the business perspective and then we'll move to the developer perspective.
So from the business perspective, so if you want to get into the blockchain aspects, I would suggest you get into online reading. So there you have plenty of materials that's available free online. You have this Princeton University that they have their own web series of like 10 to 12 episodes. In Coursera, where you can just take a certification over there, or you can start off with any of these YouTube channels where you have many channels where basically you can check out the business use cases. I would suggest for a business person just first to understand which industry they want to focus into and look into some of the use cases. There are plenty of reports given by Deloitte, given by EY, and other even companies like Wipro. They publish reports. You can just look into the reports and find out what the use cases and the basically this each of the industries are coming in leveraging the technology. So this is where for a consultant, a I want to become a business consultant in a blockchain industry. Then this is the best way to start with. For a developer, probably they can start off with looking into if they want to get into corporation or an enterprise. The three major blockchain protocols that I could see all the companies, most of the companies are using. One is Ethereum. It's a public blockchain. You have Quorum, which is the private version of Ethereum. Then you have Hyperledger. Then you have Coda. So these are the platforms that are actually used by many of these top companies. So if you can get a hang of this kind of platforms, there are many certifications involved that is available free. You can just take the certification. That's how you get into this industry. Other than that, yeah, so there are so now all these technologies, you smart contracts now. So all these technologies are coming on to wherein you can start using your basic Java knowledge to basic knowledge. They're trying to fit it with the normal commodity kind of languages to make sure that everybody can come in and learn the technology. So it's become easier now. But I would say for a developer to start off with these two, three platforms, Coda, Hyperledger, and probably a Quorum or a Ethereum to start with to have a hang of it. And in the future, we'll have companies that is coming in. You have Cadena, you have Hedera, Hashgraph. All these guys are coming in, wherein that'll be the future protocols. But you start off with Hyperledger and Ethereum, and I think we are good to go to get into the industry.
Awesome. Thank you very much for this wealth of knowledge, Vignesh. I really appreciate your time and taking time out of your schedule and talking to me about this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
For all of you out there who have listened to it, if you have any questions, feel free to drop us an email on host@eastpodcast.in if you have any questions. But Vignesh, if anybody of our listeners wants to get in touch with you directly, what's the best way for them to get in connect with you?
Yes, they can connect me via LinkedIn, which I'll pass it on to you. So I'm already there in LinkedIn. So you just try Vignesh Raja at Wipro. Yeah, I'm already there. So they can always connect me
Awesome.
via LinkedIn.
I'll link your profile for LinkedIn in the show notes. So look forward to that. And thank you very much once again for joining us on the show. For those of who are just joining us for the podcast, we spoke to Vignesh about blockchain, crypto, the use cases across the world. We spoke about the security aspects, and we've also spoken about if you're looking to get into the blockchain or the crypto space, what are the steps that you can take. Thank you very much for joining us. And if you want to reach out to us in the future, you can visit the website, that's eastpodcast.in, or email us on host@eastpodcast.in. We're on all the social media and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as The East Podcast. Thank you very much for joining us once again, and we will look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Thank you. Thank you, Baba. Thank you.